when we think about the range of labels, because we're going to move away from labels. When we think about labels, they're actually mapped onto a range of circuits. And one method in which we can think about it, or a model, is this tripartite model. So what are we looking at when we think about the fronto-striato-limbic circuits? There are 3 loops. And the first loop that we look at broadly is the affective loop. And when we think about these affective loops, it's really about this ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the combination of the VMPFC, VLPFC, orbitofrontal cortex, and its inhibition of the amygdala. You saw that when we talked about learned helplessness, the hope circuit. And you see this particular circuit is responsible for emotional regulation, and that's why it's known as the limbic loop. And you can see here, these are the projections from the ventral tegmental area where dopamine neurons are situated, and the connections from there, the nucleus accumbens down to the amygdala, really is about emotional regulation. So that's the first thing. Think about the affective loop. Second is the cognitive loop. This mediates cognition. And one of the key areas here is the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. As you know, for registrars in the EMQs, it's a very, very common question. The seat of executive function, which is dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And this doesn't function in isolation. It's connected to the striatum. So this striatum, we know, has projections, dopaminergic projections from the ventral tegmental area and the substantia nigra to the prefrontal cortex, but also the striatal areas. So the second loop, the cognitive loop. Then we've got the motor loop. This mediates activity. And here we've got connections, as you can see. Predominantly, a lot of it is the striatal aspects. Again, predominant projections from the substantia nigra. Now, what's important in the motor loop, you can see here, when the striatal activity is excessive, we can have a range of motor movement disorders. But because the prefrontal cortex is connected to the striatum, if there is excess striatal hyperactivity, there can be cognitive hyperactivity in a range, manifested in a range of ways. For example, obsessions. Or when we think about motor symptoms, these can be manifested in the form of tardive dyskinesia, for example, or tics, or Tourette's. So now you can see, when we think about the range of labels, because we're going to move away from labels, when we think about labels, they're actually mapped onto a range of circuits. And one method in which we can think about it, or a model, is this tripartite model, which is the affective loop, the cognitive loop, and the motor loop.